Hi, I'm DiMatteo of the Ask the Pharmacist radio broadcast. Thanks for tuning in with me once again today. Diet myths. I've really been wanting to do this for a long time. Diet myths. What works, what doesn't work. Zone diet, Atkins diet, low carb, low fat, high protein. Myths, confusion, what works. Maybe in this little teaching I'll talk to you a little bit about what I really believe about weight loss and about diet. But for right now, diet myths. What goes on? Let's just start with the zone diet. I'm going to go down the line and break out for you the zone diet, Atkins, eat right for your blood type. These are many questions that we get on an ongoing basis. The zone diet, what's zone all about? Well, it pretty much balances protein, carbs, and your fats. It's about 30% protein, about 40% of carbs, and it's moderated in fats. They mandate that you eat 2 snacks that are quality snacks. It's a little higher in protein, virtually no saturated fats. All good sources of fats. In principle, I don't have a problem with zone concept eating. What is it after? What's the mechanism? They're trying to control insulin, which I'm a big believer that excessive insulin production, which we should be after no matter what the dietary concept is, excess insulin production is the driving force between fat storage. So this type of a diet, the zone diet, is after glucagon, regulates how glucose is stored in the liver, and insulin really mandates and dictates how we take in nutrients and so on, energy within the cell, and then how we store fat. Too much insulin, you store fat. This diet, not a bad concept. Just going right down through, the average male might consume roughly 100 grams of protein, probably 1,400 to 1,500 calories a day on this diet, up to maybe 1,800 or so if you are physically active, you work out, you train. Women would be correspondingly dropped to maybe somewhere around 1,200 and 1,600 or so. Similar to Mediterranean, literally the zone diet teaches you that a portion, like a half of your plate should be vegetables, high fibrous vegetables. A quarter roughly to a third is protein. Another quarter to a third is of some other source of carb that is a non-starchy type of a carb or vegetable. So pretty balanced. I don't have a major problem with it. I really don't. How long can you do this? Forever. The details I think are pretty sound. The basics are pretty sound, and it's after glucose and insulin. Don't think it's a bad concept. South Beach diet. Let's roll over. I'm going to roll through these quickly. South Beach diet. What are we after with a South Beach diet concept? Insulin control. That's really what you're after. Trying to regulate insulin response, which is something that I'm after. I believe it's much more complicated than just insulin. Insulin's important. Glucagon, not going to work at the details today, but adiponectin, cholecystokinin. See, these are all chemicals that the body produces, leptin, ghrelin. They actually moderate how we eat, how much we consume, how do we turn it off, turn off the appetite. Do we keep eating when we're beyond full and we're still eating? The types of foods that we crave. All of these neurochemicals and these chemicals that the body's producing, some are actually produced by your fat cells, telling you that you don't need to eat anymore. You don't need to consume more. We have plenty in storage. So it's a very complex web, and it's a detailed web of how we get off track. But I will tell you, and maybe at the end of this, if not, I'll do another one on really, how to really lose weight. How to really lose weight. I'm going to give you today what's out there. Went through, did some research on each and every one of these dietary scenarios. South Beach, let's get back to it. They have a kickstart phase. They have kind of a reintroduction of carb phase, and then they have, so to speak, the diet for life. Can it help with insulin surges? I think so. I think it's fairly sound. Don't have a major problem with it. The principles are really more higher in protein, higher in fat, lower in carb, which is pretty close to my line of rationale and thinking. I don't see a major problem with South Beach, quite frankly, but I don't know still that that's really your answer, you following the South Beach path, you following just the Atkins path. I am always going to be more about eating principled, smaller portions, higher soluble fiber intake, lots of fiber in general, vegetables at each meal. I'm more, I don't know how to explain this, but more principled about how you eat daily. You've got to eat smaller portions, because if you're used to eating large portions, you're going to continue to eat large portions, and just by default, you consume more food, more calories. So again, I don't know that I ascribe, frankly, to any of these particular diets, but I wanted to break them out for you today. Diet myths, diet fads. I got on this diet. I am on that diet. I was on that diet. I was successful. I gained my weight back. So I want to get you away from all of that. I want to get you down to being more principled fundamentally on a daily basis about how you eat, what you consume. You've got to understand there's basic parameters that you should follow. Let's go to the Ornish. Ornish is a big diet more for cardiovascular issues. Pretty much a vegetarian. Virtually no fat. Less than 10% of your calorie consumption is through fats. Not real crazy about that. It's virtually no cholesterol. 70% of what's circulating to 80% of what's circulating through our bodies are actually manufactured by the liver. So Dean Ornish's concept, which a lot of people use for weight loss, not just cardiovascular, very vegetarian in nature, very low in fat, absolutely saturated and monosaturated, pretty low in protein. Don't know what else I can really say about that. There is some literature about reducing cardiovascular disease and so on. Certainly not a theory I would ascribe to. In principle, you need, kind of overusing that word today, but it is a lot about principles. You need good fats. You need good fats to lose weight. You need good fats like monounsaturated fats that are in olive oil, because it reduces oxidative damage to your cholesterol. Good fats that are found and the antioxidants that are found, for example, in olive oil, a monounsaturated fat, have been shown not only to protect your cholesterol from oxidizing or going bad, but it also can lower your LDLs and actually raise your HDLs. So certainly I can tell you I don't ascribe to a Dean Ornish concept. I think that way, in a very large measure, amplifies the dietary concepts to cardiovascular disease, when I think a lot of our cardiovascular issues are too much white, too much refined, too much processed, too much saturated fat, etc. Let's move over to some of the more fads, if you will. Cabbage soup diet. What's with a cabbage soup diet? What's phenomenal about it? It's high in fiber. It's very restricted in calorie intake. So you drop calories. You are in low protein, actually. You lose a lot of water in those initial induction phases with cabbage soup. But the whole key is you have a concept of jump starting your diet, but it really is all about cutting calories. Beyond that, I'm not real sure that I cannot support this type of a dietary concept. Where is it applicable? Maybe short term. If you kind of want to kickstart something, I don't see this for any period of time. I think blood sugar instabilities are a huge problem and downsides with a cabbage soup diet. I even wonder about that concept even with an Ornish plan. You need adequate fats and proteins to stabilize your blood sugars. Don't know that I like those horrible restrictions, especially if someone has tendencies to hyperinsulinism. Your blood sugars will drop when you dramatically jump onto one of these more fad type diets. Why I say low and slow, smaller portions, plenty of fiber through high fiber types of vegetables, lean protein, plenty of good fats. I think that's the ABCs. Let's go over to the eat right for your blood type diet. A lot of people utilize this concept more for allergies. I mean, you name it, even to lose weight. I think there's, what are you, type A blood? Are you O? Are you B? Are you AB? I have a real problem with this. I read this book about 12, 13 years ago. I find a lot of pitfalls. I redid some research once again, as you can see. I have a hard time with the fact that if you're type O, you fall into more of a hunter type dietary category, which would mean that you would be very high in protein, very low in carbs. If you're type O, I have a hard time. If you're a type A, you're considered more a cultivator. So you should eat lots of vegetables, be more vegetarian in dietary style. If you're B, type B blood, you should be more nomadic. You should consume a lot of dairy. I just have a real problem with this whole concept. I really do. The advocates believe that you should consume this forever. The efficacy, the literature to support anything from a weight loss standpoint and even symptom relief are weak at best. I find it very impractical. So I think you could scratch that one off of your list as well. Atkins diet. Big popular diet. High protein, high fat, very low carb. Now, to be fair to the Atkins diet, they have different levels that you quote unquote mature through, and you begin to consume more fibrous types of vegetables as you go into whatever their latter phases are. But what is the whole idea with an Atkins diet? It's also to control insulin response. I just find it too extreme, too dramatic, and I'll talk about the downsides. Lowering insulin response, I'm okay with. I just don't know that you should do it this way, frankly. A lot of discussion about you moving into a ketosis state and it being dangerous. I don't know that I agree from a biochemistry standpoint that that's necessarily dangerous per se. A lot of young children with seizure problems do good on more of a ketosis-inducing diet, but that's for a disease state. You need to lose weight. You need to go back to principle and not follow something as extreme. If you were to ask me, does an Atkins diet concept actually work? Will you lose weight? Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't argue. I will find it hard to believe that if you followed an Atkins concept that you won't lose weight. But the downside is it really doesn't teach you how to eat long term, and typically you pretty much gain the weight back when you get off of the diet and you migrate back to what you were doing before. Why you need to really change completely your thinking, your attitude, your heart attitude, shrink your stomach, portion control. Again, that's still more my theme as opposed to these dietary scenarios. Short term, if you say to me, I want to just do it short term to drop a few pounds and to get me started, don't have a problem with that. So if I went through and classified, does it work? Yes. What's the basic concepts? We've talked about it. Very high protein, very high fat, very low carb. The terms might be short, not long term for me. Pitfalls, though, are what I'm concerned about with this diet. I mean, I've reviewed literature on increasing rates of pancreatitis. I've talked about it on the radio show. Increasing rates of gallbladder disease, elevated liver enzymes, liver function tests, certainly as mentioned. Osteoporosis risk is certainly higher. Kidney stone risk certainly goes up as well. I think with Atkins, there are a lot of health implications that are very negative. I cannot certainly recommend that concept to you. What you also see from a practical standpoint, many times folks initially feel much better. They feel good when they do this, the first maybe week, 10 days, 14 days, because they're so carb loaded, they're so sugar loaded, so insulin spiking, they feel great, they get energy. But that very much of that restricted carb concept, I believe you find many times folks crash and burn. And in many cases, they really don't feel well long term. Let me talk to you a little bit about Mediterranean diets very, very quickly before we close. It's higher in fiber, higher in monounsaturated fats, moderate in protein, very high in vegetables, very high in fruits, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, low in dairy, fish, poultry, and eggs. Pretty moderate consumption of eggs, fish, poultry. Really, from a principle standpoint, not just because it's part of my heritage, because you see the Mediterranean rim, you look at cardiovascular disease, you look at weight issues. I think the real key here is in the Mediterranean style diet, they eat a lot of fresh, live, real foods. If you go through this, nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, vegetables, fruits. So you see very little in the way of processed foods here. Olive oil, a lot of olive oil. Very, very little in the way of manufactured, prefabricated foods. I think that's really the key and why I think a Mediterranean style diet has been shown not only to be cardiovascular healthy, even weight healthy. I really don't have a problem with a Mediterranean-style diet of eating in any way, shape, or form. That, I believe, covers, I believe we covered everything from zone to Mediterranean. A lot of diet myths, cabbage soup diets. There's a lot of other diets that are out there where you only eat citrus fruits for X number of days and so on. Folks, it's all craziness. I do not ascribe to it. I don't encourage you to do it. I didn't want to get into a lot of gritty details in some of the literature that I did pull up and some of the side effects of some of these diets. But I think most of them, eat right for your blood type, not enough to it scientifically. Zone, I think, is not too bad. I think you're in the hunt. South Beach, you're in the hunt. But why ascribe to a specific dietary plan? Why not learn to eat in principles, which we will talk about as we move through into future teachings. Atkins, too extreme. Too many bodily function aberrations that come about when we do that. I hope you've enjoyed diet myths, diet fads. Learn to eat sensibly, principled. That's really your long-term options and answers, and not fads and pretty much myths. That's all they are. God bless you. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.